Good morning and welcome to our daily reflection on this Tuesday of the fourth week of Easter. The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. The feast of the dedication was taking place in Jerusalem. It was winter, and Jesus walked about in the temple area on the portico of Solomon. So the Jews gathered around him and said to him, "How long are you going to keep us in suspense? If you are the Christ, tell us plainly." Jesus answered them, "I told you, and you do not believe. The works I do in my Father's name testify to me, but you do not believe, because you are not among my sheep. My sheep hear my voice. I know them, and they follow me. I give them eternal life, and they shall never perish. No one can take them out of my hand. My Father, who has given them to me, is greater than all, and no one can take them out of the Father's hand. The Father and I are one." The Gospel of the Lord. I spent some time teaching both in the high school and the junior high school levels. I still have the privilege to do some teaching even now in our faith formation program here in the parish. One of the most common excuses I used to hear from some of my students when they failed to hand in an assignment or when they didn't do well on a test was, "Deacon Darrell, you didn't tell us about this." Now, I would hear that from one or two students. "You didn't tell us this was due today." Meanwhile, I'd be standing there with a pile of 98 or so completed assignments. So apparently I did announce the due date for the assignment. Or on a test, the students that missed a question would like to say, "You never taught us this." But there would be the majority, if not most of the students who got the answer right. So apparently I did teach that fact. You see, the ones who said I never said this, or that were probably saying that, because they weren't listening when indeed I did say it. I have the feeling that Jesus often felt that same frustration. He certainly seems to be saying that in today's gospel when they say to him, "How long are you going to keep us in suspense? If you are the Christ, tell us plainly." Tell them plainly. He had been preaching for all that time. He had been performing miracles. Tell them plainly. They make it sound just like my students. "You never told us this." Oh, he couldn't have been any plainer. It seems like he had been speaking volumes. And yet perhaps some or many chose not to hear. Perhaps some chose only to hear what they wanted to hear. Perhaps some refused to see him as their shepherd. Perhaps they were listening to other voices. Perhaps they were following other shepherds. Perhaps they thought they either didn't need a shepherd or could very easily shepherd themselves. And in doing so, they found themselves quite often not being shepherded at all. And then they almost seem like they're begging for Jesus to tell them he is the Messiah. Perhaps they discovered what they needed. But Jesus tells them that indeed he did speak plainly, and those who followed him, those who were his sheep, they heard his voice. They knew who he was. But perhaps some were not listening to his voice. And so who are we listening to these days? In the chaos of our world situation, there are so many voices. Sometimes those voices seem to be coming from unexpected places. You expect a particular person in your life to believe one thing, and you find out that they're really entrenched in another belief altogether. And it seems very unsettling. And so we yearn for the voice of the shepherd. And in the chaos and all the voices that we hear in the court of public opinion, which is insisting that you pick a side, we can sometimes get the feeling that perhaps the shepherd is not speaking. So we say to him, stop keeping us in suspense. Tell us the truth. Tell us what to do. And perhaps he says to us, you've been with me so long. Nothing's changed. I am who I am. I have spoken plainly. The answer is the same. The truth is the same. The answer is love one another as I have loved you. You see, in all the chaos of our times, we seem to be expecting some new message from the shepherd. We seem to be thinking he's going to say, remember what I told you about loving one another? Well, apparently that was a bad idea, so let's try something else. Maybe try going against one another. Maybe you can just argue with each other all the time. Just pick sides. Maybe those sides can be based on race or politics or gender. You pick sides and then you can beat each other up and the strongest side will win. Let's go with that. Of course, God is not saying that. The Good Shepherd is not deciding to lead us down some newly found path. He's not saying that the old way of selfless love was wrong. No, his message is the same. It's the same yesterday, today, and forever. So what are we going to do? We're going to suddenly now go to the shepherd and say, you never told us? You never told us to love one another? You never told us how to treat one another? Why did you leave us in suspense? And of course, he'll have the right to laugh at that and say, my sheep hear my voice. And once again, because of the faithfulness of the loving shepherd, he will very simply say to each of us, follow me. Will we hear his voice? Thank you so much for joining us today for this daily reflection. Let us continue to pray for one another. Please remain safe. God bless you all.